So good evening, everyone. It's really a joy to be with you. And thank you, Ryan and Emily, for the invitation. And it's really sweet to take a moment to take in your faces. And we're like real people talking. So great. I'm uh, signing in from Manhattan, little island off the coast of New Jersey. And very we had a very rich weekend of study. We're doing our Sangha is doing a study of the Zen ancestors, which is very lively. So we just began a once a month and focusing on the Chinese ancestors, and then today we were deep into precepts. So it's really feel very soaked and like when that beautiful image that Shinra Suzuki gives of walking through the fog and you just get really wet, and how beautiful that is to practice together. So it's really joyful to be with this community and that we're all practicing together. So I was asked to speak about concentration, and it is just very rare to Toto's lurking, and and it is very rare to pay attention and to really learn how to concentrate. And lately, how I've been reflecting on right concentration, the nobility of concentration, is to really reflect on what is it I don't want to pay attention to, and who is it that I don't want to pay attention to. And I often reflect on that beautiful letter that Albert Einstein wrote a friend, where he said, our work is to widen out circles of compassion. That's our work, which to me is like super bodhisattva activity at work. And to reflect on the edges of our compassion feels like a really important place to concentrate, to really focus our concentration around where are we not loving and tender and caring. And I find myself really vigorously practicing this. I feel often like I'm riding wild bull. And these days where there's so much reactivity, which I think is not, some people say, oh, it's this time where people are like this. But this time the world is so extreme. Well, the world has gone through extremes. It ebbs and flows, and we are in one of those moments. And so I often reflect on Shakyamuni Buddha and the times that he also went through, where people tried to kill him, but there was also extremes. And so how do we really learn how to concentrate in the midst of our fear, in the midst of disorientation? And these are just some things that I've been reflecting on and feeling myself, feeling disoriented, feeling pulled to take sides. There's so much about like, which side are you on and whose side are you on? And this has been growing and growing in our culture. And so I have become more and more deeply, really in my zazen, to really concentrate on really tracking those little movements in your mind, in my mind. This is what I've been doing every day, just to like really tracking what is that like to really move and notice when I'm going into a thought becomes an idea becomes my word, and then a word becomes the action, and action becomes our character. And so really seeing if I can get as close as possible to just thoughts and concentrating on the rigor of just tending. And as Dogen Zenji talks about, you know, be very careful and learn how to practice refraining from indulging our habitual mind. And let me tell you, like, this is very humbling and deeply embarrassing, because you realize, at least I have been, so every morning, I don't know what people's politics are. Actually, I don't really care, but it's not my main interest, but I sign on to two websites. One is Breitbart, which is a certain kind of media. And then I also sign on to The Nation, which is another different kind of media source, and as mind training. So I do this actually before Zazen, just to like see like, how am I doing? And I still find very quickly that I become just like these two extremes, these, one progressive left and one, kind of white nationalist group. And so and to me, it's almost like there's this beautiful, strangely beautiful similarity between them, which reminded me so much of has anyone read the beautiful book by Jarvis J. Masters about finding freedom? Anyone? No? It's a very beautiful book. He's a man who's inside of San Quentin and a very steady practitioner himself. And he talks about, all the angry faces, that everyone's sure that they're right. And it's so interesting, no matter, and he talks about it in his book as, the Greenpeace people are all angry and these people are angry, and what they all have in common is just like a lot of angry faces. And so it's a very interesting, and I find that I have an angry face almost immediately when I read these things, no matter what the source is. Lots of opinions, just like immediately. I'm sure I'm right. Or like actually feeling like what groups should live and which groups shouldn't live. I notice those thoughts. And so to me, it's a form of, I'm so grateful to Shakyamuni Buddha for laying out this map for us to really concentrate and to have a rigorous, tender looking. And so for me, the rigor has to be combined with tenderness, because we don't want to use that as a weapon either, but to be like, wow, so humbling, so embarrassing to really look at how hatred can form. That's what I've been tracking in myself. I'm using this right concentration to really examine my own capacity for hatred. And it's so humbling to see how much of it there is. And it's so interesting because I tend to feel like mostly like awesome most of the time, but it's also would be hubris to think that I also don't have the kleshas, of course, we all have the greed and the hatred and the delusion of separateness and saying, I'm not you. And so I guess one of the things that I wanted it feels incredibly important, at least to me, in this time, in this place, in this tender time, to what we can do as practitioners of the way. To take some time every day to practice with right concentration in a vigorous and tender way, to really allow ourselves to get juicy and real into what we are doing. with our mind, to really reflect wholeheartedly, tenderly, and really seeing our capacity for violence and hatred. And I feel like that many of us are go into despair or overwhelmed. But what I've been finding, what I've been in my experimentation, is that the more I watch very carefully and the more I reflect on atonement, to be at one with, my goodness, all evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought. Now I atone for it all. It has given me a very different relationship with this verse. I'm not sure if your group uses that verse, but it's yes, some people are familiar. Great, yeah, it's very powerful. To we chant that each morning in the Zen Center, and it has a whole different meaning now that I've been really focused and using right concentration to really reflect on how am I actually doing, and how do I want to participate in the world? How do I want to be a practitioner in this time? And for me, I often bow and thank, Kobo Daishi, the great teacher in Japan, who said, the depths of someone's practice is by how they serve others. So like, I'm really aware these days about how much having a settled mind is a benefit to others. And settled mind does not, to me, it's not a romantic thing. Actually, it'd be like the willingness to tremble with our difficulties, to turn towards, to using right concentration to see like, yes, I am part of all the suffering and all the joy. That incredible, beautiful chant of atonement is really pointing the direction for me in kind of a like, it's almost might even be impossible to like spiritual bypass out of that using that chant. Like, there's no way to get it sugar coated when we realize all evil karma ever committed might be, that I am part of the whole. And my teacher in Japan is a marvelous human being, but he often speaks about, his name is Kojima Genyu Roshi, and he's talks about that the gasho is like a reminder that half of our practice must be atonement, and half the practice is the precepts. So learn it, and to me, the way I understand his teaching, my limited understanding, is to appreciate that atonement requires embarrassment and requires humility. So if we're going to concentrate in a real way, we must be willing to be foolish, to realize that we're not going to do it correctly, and yet we can bring our whole selves to it. To me, this feels so important, so vital. And then we can begin to really reflect on the precepts. Then we can really then we can bring it in. But if we're not willing to really realize like what jerks we could be with our own mind, how unkind we all can be, it's so liberating, at least for me. And it's and to me it creates more capacity for joy. So the right concentration for me is that, because the precision, again, to come back to that, is critical. To really be clear, how do I want to live? What's actually useful? What serves the harmony of the world? What allows the circle of compassion to grow? Who is it that I feel like I won't harbor an aspect of ourselves, an aspect of another, a group, a nation, anyone? The beautiful thing, I love physics very much, and also astronomy. So for me, they're sort of the same. It's like looking at a microscope is so amazing because you look really carefully at things and there's nothing ultimately there. And you look at the telescope and it's mostly boundless space. And the tragedy, in a way, and the opportunity are the same. That Shakyamuni Buddha also invited us to really reflect on, wow, whenever we think we're one thing, one opinion, one feeling, one thought, which I don't know about you, but I could easily fall into and go down a dark path, even for a moment. So how do we come back? And so that right concentration is just, again, how do we return? Right. Boundless space. Where is that? It's actually in here and in here. But how often are we allowing that? And to me, it is really through that cultivation of concentration that we can actually begin to see that. Even for a moment, for a little glimpse. It is a beautiful thing. So I'm so grateful. I hope something that I said was helpful. And I'm mostly interested in talking with you. So, seeing what could be potentially useful. Thank you.
You'd be open to answering or responding to some questions or engaging?
Yeah, I have no answers, so response. I can do responses.
That sounds lovely. Well, if people
Might
want
be.
to raise their physical hand or raise their Zoom hand to indicate you'd like to ask a question, and or you can unmute as well. So, Liz, and then Moira, I think. Yeah. Liz.
Hi, Koshin. Hello.
Hey.
I wanted to share with you something that you wrote that's really resonated with me, and it's in the chapter that we're talking about. I think attention is a place of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a previous chapter you had said something about, if this is important to you, like put sticky notes all over your apartment or something. So I mentally put sticky notes all over our apartment. I hope you don't mind. Mm-hmm. And they all say the same thing, 360 degrees. And I really want to thank you for that, because when I pay attention to the 360 and then up through my feet and into myself, it's opening up something bigger and allowing me to think about how I can be of service in that moment. So thank you for that.
So beautiful.
How did you come across that thought?
Well, I can't claim that thought. I just listen. I guess part of it was many years ago. I don't know, like 30 years ago, which in the span of time is not a long time. But anyway, I was reading this book by this woman, Marie Howe, and I don't know if some of you are familiar with Marie, but she's an amazing poet. Amazing. And someone handed me this book in Spain, and What the Living Do, this incredible book. And I was like, well, whoever this lady is, like, I'm like all about it. So I tried to find out like how I could study with her, and and I found out she was teaching in an MFA program in Sarah Lawrence, and I was like, okay, I'll do that. And it was her that Marie, who now has become a very close friend, but I remember once in a poetry workshop, she said, please stop writing about and talking about what's in front of you. Talk about what's behind you and all around you. That's what makes our lives our lives. And I was like, wow. It blew my mind. And then I realized, like, right, like we can all do that. So it's really Marie. So we can thank her. I will thank her tomorrow. Yeah. I think like not many of us have like original ideas. We're just like passing things along. That's why sometimes it always feels weird, like having your name on things. I feel like I'm just so grateful. Yeah. Thank you, Liz.
Well, thank you for passing along the things that you chose to pass along. Appreciate it.
Such a joy. It's like the shy group. Serenity and Ryan are particularly shy.
Marla, do you want to unmute?
Yes, greetings. I have a question about entanglements. I've been reciting the atonement and the ancient tangled karma and everything for a long time. And yesterday, I just happened to learn in a class about kleshas. And so in my mind, kleshas are kind of the local version of atonement and entanglements. And the atonements, the ancient tangled karma, are kind of the global. Am I getting it right, or is there any differentiation between them? Or is that a dumb question? Doesn't matter.
Well, everything matters and nothing matters, right? I'm sure I'm not an academic, so I'm a poet. So for me, if you go deeply into anything, you find everything. So if you go deeply into the kleshas, I think you find all the ancient twisted karma, at least how I feel through and practice with Shakyamuni Buddha's teaching on the kleshas is that, oh my goodness, that if we enter, in the book, I call them giants because I feel like that they are these giants that we have to reckon with. And if we enter them deeply enough, to me, that's where the twisted karma comes from. Like most of us, like forgetting that we have it. And then we act out and do all sorts of unskillful things or super harmful things or genocidal things, like, you know, like in the history of time, very popular, you know, and terrible. So I think, to me, they are, the kleshas are where it begins. That's my experience. It's not like that's true. It's just, I experience, like, if I can meet the giant of greed and really, to me, like, it has to do with the right concentration, like, and stay with it. Boy, it's humbling, and boy, like, it just shows up everywhere, because we just at least what the more I sit, and I've been sitting a while, they're just, softness and tenderness are the only thing that makes sense, because they just see, like, it's happening all over the world. Everyone is just struggling because most people are not even aware about these things that are motivating all of us, because we happen to be human beings. And most people think it's personal, like your weird stuff. Does that make sense? No. Thank you. All right. I think this is like a shy group.
Maura, do you want to unmute?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Koshin, and thank you all for being here. I wanted to express gratitude for your very explicit description of a teaching, which I didn't grab entirely, but that atonement and comes first, I think you said. Of course, that's linear, but what I got from that, it touched on an experience I had recently where I was actually trying to be of service in a volunteer event. And the person who, the lines of authority weren't clear, nor were the directions. All of my human stuff came in, you know, like I wanted to be a people pleaser, I wanted to do it right. And then the person who was in charge, I felt, criticized me in front of other people. And everything in my family system came roaring up and out. And I just wanted, I mean, I was so embarrassed and used that word earlier. And luckily, this person whom I'm in a relationship with is a wise and gentle soul. And I was very afraid to talk to her about it, but it felt necessary for me to grow. And it was a wonderful thing, but it just reminded me of that humility, you know, and that I don't know what you were referring to that is a giant, but in that experience, I felt like I was dying. I felt like, I mean, my ego was just on fire. I had so much shame. And one of the things that she said that was so helpful was, oh, I see you took it personally. And I was like, oh, and how, baby, you know, and what a burden that is. I mean, we all probably know about these things, but in terms of your teaching, the atonement process for me brings me back into touch with that kind of deep shame and humility and how I go around in the world lighting fires. And yeah, it bridges to my humanity in a way that I hadn't ever heard before. So thank you. And I love the humor that comes out of this because, oh, amen.
Exactly. Amen. That's right. You know, it's that. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that tender story. And, you know, that's so important to me about how we can move from this shame, which is so overly personal, right? And so awful. It's so awful. And to me, the embarrassment is such a wonderful, joyful thing. Just to, it doesn't always feel good, but it's like, it is so embarrassing. Like we get so caught up in stupid shit, we just do like an old weird stuff, right? Like it just comes out like it's like a leviathan. It's like rah, rah, like it just it's so embarrassing. And like we're not, and we think we're in charge. That's also what's funny, and but what we can do is with the concentration, right? We can say like, right, yes, I'm come back to our hara, come back to the breath. Like, okay. I mean, it's incredibly embarrassing. And like, if we can't laugh about it and realize that we're all a little bit crazy, then we actually, I feel like we can't really progress much, and we can't really experience compassion for others, because otherwise we're turning it into another reason why we suck and why we're so important and unworthy, which is actually a collective weird form of narcissism. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's yeah, it just feels like that to me. It just feels like a self-obsession that like all of us do. We're all doing that, which is also why embarrassment and humor is important, because we're all becoming so self-obsessed, which Shakyamuni Buddha also teaches, like, the self-clinging is the main delusion. The main klesha of delusion is our self-obsession, self-clinging. And we all do it. So it doesn't make like, it's what Julia does, or Bonnie does, or Robert does, Ruth, or like whoever, it's like, no, we all do it. And so that's the beauty of Sangha, is like we can get together and say, I do it this way, or I'm struggling with it in this way. How about you? How are you practicing with that, with our collective crazy? I feel like actually it's incredibly important and very freeing in terms of Sangha practice to actually have these kind of conversations, to normalize, like, wow, we all struggle. Maybe that Shakyamuni Buddha was onto something about kleshas, that we all struggle with these three things. That's why I call them giants. Like, I just feel like we have to reckon with them all the time.
Mhm.
Because they don't actually go away. They just wander off for a bit, and then they come back. Wherever. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Koshin, I was struck in the beginning of the chapter on right concentration when you referenced the interesting element of right concentration being eighth, and sort of writing a book about Zen that doesn't talk about Zazen until so many chapters in. And what I feel like what it really brought up for me was, I think my entry point into Buddhism was meditation. But my experience of Zazen has shifted so much over the years because of the deepening of, like you sort of pointed to, the understanding of right view, and sort of understanding sort of the way that the world is, and understanding my involvement in it and the karma that I'm always entangled with. And so I really appreciated that, because I think that arose as a sort of a question, like how interesting that meditation is the last thing, but it's sort of so often the center of things when we think about Buddhism. But to think about sort of concentration and Zazen in particular, as sort of informed by and deepened and sort of enlivened by. And I think back to you sort of pointed to at the beginning of talking tonight, of sort of centering that question of love. Because I think that's been part of the shift for me as well, that it's not just sitting and paying attention, it's also like this sitting and paying attention with this intention, around being loving and being sort of service in the world. So just really appreciating your framing that relationship, because I think it really helped me understand my own relationship with Zazen over the years in a new way. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And, yeah, we have this study, actually, turns out. Turns out knowing some stuff is really helpful, you know. And I remember, and I write about this too, I had talked about embarrassment. So I would thought I was like all in. I was all in, you know. And when I was with my first teacher, John Daido, it was an amazing person. And I was young, you know. I met him when I was 17, and I was like this kid there. And I got so caught up with like this social justice group that was part of it. And I was like, yeah, down with the patriarchy. And I was like, like, and a bunch of us left in like a big hub. We like made a split in the community. And I was like 21, you know. The rest of the people were like in their 40s, but I was like the kid, like, yeah, down with the patriarchy. I was working at Ms. Magazine. I was a women's studies major. You know, you can get the vibe. And I really was so immature. And it took me a very long time, or the time that it took, to just be like, wow, I was a complete jerk. And he actually was like, the issue, what it was like that someone wanted to ordain. And in his system, which, you know, everyone has their whatever system they're in, you know, every group has its norms. It was like, if you ordain, you have to live there. And this one person wanted to like do what they wanted to do. And he was like, no, if you want to do that, you go somewhere else. That's great. And my blessing. Anyway, that turned into a story that he was like the patriarchy. And it's like that, no, he was just actually really clear. He loved ordaining women and whatever. It's obviously more complicated, but essentially that was. And but I just really saw my own part in it. And I was so grateful that I was able to apologize to him. Many years later, we actually met at Ahidji and was able to bow and to really atone. Like, wow, like I was a jerk, you know? And because I wasn't very sophisticated, you know, it wasn't because I was a bad person. I just like was a jerk. You know, we do jerky things. And I feel like feels very related to what you're saying, Ryan. Just like I feel like, you know, it's all about the Zazen, but I wasn't very sophisticated about this kind of study about like the Four Noble Truths and the Kleshas. And like I wish I had been reflecting on, you know. I never even thought to study those things. I was just like all about Zazen and like, you know, the forms. And there's something so invaluable about really studying what the Buddha teaches, what Dogen Zenji teaches, what, you know, all of their teachings are so rich. And just to me, it makes our life of practice more magnificent. Yeah. Anything else?
DJ?
CJ.
Hi, Koshin.
Hey.
Hey, man, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your practice, and thanks for your work, all your work, including your writing. And, you know, mostly thanks for being who you are, as you are, and the way you are, and including all the things that you're atoning for, too. It comes through as teaching in a really resonant, powerful way. Here's my question. I want to invite you to riff on a little something extending beyond what you wrote in your book in the chapter on seated meditation. You're talking about in a section all of this kind of stuff we've been talking about just now that can come up, the shit, the poop, or the stuff we call shit and poop that feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in Zazen, but in all of practice.
All the time.
Every
All the time.
Yeah. But here's the sentence you write. You write, yet there is this powerful healing that can take place if we stay the course. And then you repeat it in italics, so it's important. If we stay the course. For one lifetime at least. And I wanted to invite you to say a little bit more about staying the course and how we stay that course, and with the motivation for staying the course. What or who or from where does that staying the course come from? Especially giving all these things that we meet when we feel it in this way.
Yeah. Thank you. Couple of things come to mind. One is I have a friend, Higyoku Nakao, who was the third abbot of Zen Center Los Angeles. And she was the Jisha of Maizumi Taisen Roshi. And one day she went in the Dogasan room and he was crying. And she said, Roshi, what's happening? And he said, oh, just so few people complete the training. And it's very touching. And that always touched me deeply, which feels related to what I was writing about. And I remember hearing about that shortly after meeting Maizumi Roshi many years ago, and being so touched by his humility and touched by yeah, I think I wrote about this too in the book about Maizumi Roshi and why I love him. Did I think I did. Yeah, so he was an amazing Zen teacher and also like an alcoholic and had sex with students. So it's like he did all the things, right? All the cliche things. So he did something very different. It always moves me so deeply. So just give me a sec. So I also have to say that, as I grew up in a home that was very violent and very, there was so much transgression and sexual transgression, verbal transgression, violence, all forms of violence. So to learn about when Maizumi Roshi, when that exploded in the community, which caused immense harm, his actions caused immense harm. Many people left, many people didn't. And Maizumi Roshi never defended himself or made any excuses. He said, I did all those things. I had never encountered someone who had done those things to other people and was like, yes, I did those things. and there's any excuse, anything that he could say would take away from the reality of the harm that he caused. So what he did do was sit in the Zendo every day. At the end of morning zazen, he would just allow people to say whatever they had to say. People screamed at him, people cried, people eviscerated him, people told him how much they loved him, but told him every day for a long, long time. And he would just sit there and receive it and often cry. For me, who does that? I don't know if I still aspire to be that person, because I don't do those things, but I am unkind sometimes. Choda and I got in a fight for like I do things, right? And we're fine. But like it's, we do things. But how rarely are we show up with our unguarded, reliable face and say, I'm here. This is for me a different level of what we've been talking about all night. To me, staying the course is for me saying, I will completely atone and I'm not going to project it onto you. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm not going to take the easy out, which to me is always like, oh, it's too hard. Yeah, it is. I love when people come for, people go for Doga-san, they're like, it's hard. I'm like, mm-hmm. Yes. This is against the stream teaching. Zadis and gentle people, like we are. So going the course to me means that we have to keep allowing our heart to break open and find the places where, because it's going to always be scary. There will be scary things along the way, at least in my experience. Like I see things that are like so humbling or such, such a grief. Things that happen in the world, things that happen in our communities, things that happen with family and friends. How do we stay the course and say, yes, I want to, at least for a lifetime, that is my plan. And I think that this is why I love studying the ancestors, because like they were like freaking like bringing it to the mat. My goodness, and I need them. I need to know their stories to inspire me. I need their stories, and so that I can just keep moving it through my life to generations after me. I think that we tend to evaluate too soon. Way too soon. We say like, oh, I'll try this out. We've all done that, right? Let's see if I like it. Try it out. It's way too soon so often. And so how do we, really slow it down? And realize that like my big plan is to evaluate when I'm dead. It actually will not be up to me to decide how I did, actually. What would that be like? Just surrender that like, who cares? Like, really, what I think, how I'm doing, whether I'm really useful or clever or whatever the kind of shtick we're using to hide our complexity. We're so many things. And so to me, you know, I guess maybe the main thing is really like, what would it be like to surrender evaluating progress and just allow yourself to show your gratitude for our ancestors? None of us would be here. None of us would be here without Shakyamuni Buddha, without Prajnatara, Bodhidharma's teacher, Bodhidharma, Wakey. These people like we don't really even know about. Guruji, Yogan's teacher. So like the least we could do. Oh, another thought. This past year was the anniversary of Keizan Zenji, Keizan Jokin Roshi, who was the Zenji of the creator of Sojoji, the other main monastery of our school. And I asked my teacher, I'm like, should we go to this memorial service? And he said, it's the least you could do. I thought that was freaking brilliant. I was like, I bought my ticket. You know, it's like we have this idea, like, oh, should I go or should I go to a session? Like, the least you could do. I love that. So like, let's like put the bar up way beyond us. I don't know. The more I do that, the more joy I have. Because most of the limitations are like weird and small and so self-oriented. Small, self-oriented, like, oh, it's too hard, or I can't do that, or it's all of it, at least in myself. So like this expanse. Let's go. The least we could do, like, yeah, let's go to the ceremony. I don't know how that's gonna happen. Let's figure it out. Thank you for the questions and the invitation to explore.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm so grateful to you all. I'm gonna turn into a pumpkin in a minute.
I mean, we know it's an hour later there for you than many of us in Central Standard Time. So thank you so much for joining us and giving part of your evening over, knowing especially that you were guiding 2 different launches of courses today and yesterday, correct?
And so it goes.
So thank
We
you.
do what we can.
Yeah.
We do what we can. So grateful to you all. And thank you, Ryan and Emily, for the invitation and these beautiful faces. I'm so grateful to be with you all. And may we practice together soon. Be well, everyone.
Awesome.